Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Engler Journey podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Vanderford, and today I have the pleasure of being with the scientist here in the Engler program, Logan Hafer, and it's so nice to be here with you today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about your Engler journey here in the program. And first of all, I want to start off with your background. How did you come to the Engler program, and why did you want to come to UNL?
So I'm from Dunning, Nebraska originally. My mom's family has a cattle operation there, cow-calf operation. So I spent most of my childhood, I guess, in beef production. Then we sort of had a transition when I was in high school, and we moved up to the Ainsworth area by Long Pine, where we live now. And so that's where I graduated school. I graduated from Ainsworth. And then I guess I always have kind of had, as a result of that upbringing, I've always had a kind of a passion for agriculture. But I've also always, been into, science. I'm a very nerdy sort of person. A lot of people might think. So I have always wanted to kind of take my love for agriculture and combine that sort of with my affinity, I guess, for science and make a positive impact in that way. Coming into college, there really wasn't any doubt where I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. With me going to UNL now, my entire immediate family has gone to UNL. So both my parents, both my two older sisters coming into UNL. My older sister, JC, 2 years older than me, she was in the program at the time, and it was sort of her influence that got me into Engler, I would say. So that was really kind of a neat deal to get exposed to the program in that way. But yeah, that's sort of how I got to UNL and how I got into the program.
Yeah, very cool. Coming from a smaller community, you moved from Dunning to Long Pine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
yeah.
Dunning is very small, like less than 100 people now. The school there, Sandhills, it's basically all of Blaine County, and they co-op with Thedford to the west for sports. So going up to Ainsworth, it was a larger school, and Long Pine is kind of between Ainsworth and Bassett, where Paul Engler is from. Ainsworth had a lot more opportunity for me. I was able to, it wasn't a huge size difference, but the increase in the amount of people allowed me to really not only start over as you would go into a new school, but also being able to really, pick and choose, be selective about what I wanted to do so that I could be more intentional. I was able to, drop a couple things I didn't like doing. I was able to really lean more into FFA, that sort of thing, among other activities.
So you just said you're an FFA and you did speech.
Yep.
Were those two some of your most influential activities you did that have helped you through college?
Yeah, I would say so. FFA, in our family at least, FFA is a big deal. We were never a 4-H family at all, really.
Yeah.
Even though Dunning is like very close to the state 4-H camp at Halsey before it burned down, unfortunately. But so we always cared a lot about FFA. My parents are both state FFA officers. So in going to Ainsworth to a slightly larger program that really was a lot more active, especially in how they competed and things like that, I was able to learn a lot more new things, got into, did more types of judging. I was actually really big into range judging, even though that's not necessarily affiliated with FFA, but it's a really big deal out there. And then I also got introduced to parliamentary procedure. They didn't have Parley Pro at Sandhills, but I kind of got thrown into that. Liked it among other FFA activities. I did all sorts of stuff on and off. But then, speech. Ainsworth was kind of my opportunity to jump back into speech, and I enjoyed it. Anyone who's been on high school speech teams, everybody's a little weird in their own way, but it's a really fun group to be around usually. So being able to do speech again was just a neat experience. I did persuasive speaking, did OID a bit, which was pretty fun. But those two combined definitely set me up for college in a good way, I would say, among all the other things I did too.
So having all those experiences helped you coming to college, and I know you mentioned Paul Engler. With Paul Engler, he came from a similar community just like you.
Yeah.
And do you think some of those values coming from a smaller community is why he started this program?
Oh, absolutely. I think the small community is what really defines Engler, whether it's the small communities that we come from to the small community that we have here. Paul Engler and I we came from a really pretty similar background in a beef background in the Sandhills, though Paul definitely was way more of a cowboy than I am, I'm sure. The small community really is the cornerstone, I would say, of Engler, and then out there where honestly, out in the Sandhills, that's about all you have are those small communities, and they're essential.
So, really, Paul, he kind of built this community for us all to come together and to create businesses and create connections in a smaller community, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite experiences from the Engler program, like events or just community events?
Yeah, so honestly, looking back, I probably could have gotten a little bit more involved in the program, but I also don't really regret how I sort of spread out my involvement. I did a lot of things in college, but in Engler, I went on 2 Engler treks. I really like those. When you get to travel with a group of people, it's a good opportunity to bond with and grow closer together with whoever you're traveling with. And then it was, it's obviously really neat to go to different parts, whether it's different parts of the state where I got to go on or the out-of-state ones. It's neat to see what people are doing with their businesses and to hear their story. So the Engler Trek would be one of my favorite events. I also really liked Fireside. That's probably, I think I went to maybe 3 or 4 firesides, and of course I had the privilege of being able to be the event manager for last semester's fireside, which was a neat experience. Those events and then that role that I had last semester more or less sums up about everything I did in Engler outside of taking the core classes, obviously taking several modules.
Could you talk about your experience being an event manager and what that was like?
Yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. It was a lot of mainly just, when you're talking about an event like Fireside, most of it is just getting a hold of people and then lining everything up. Probably could have reached out a little sooner to some people, but we ended up with a good selection. I got compliments from the staff and from people who joined, which is good to hear. So it was experience to have in my back pocket, being able to put on an event, not really from scratch. There's plenty of examples from the past to go off of. I really liked what Abby Miller had done the semester before me, so we kind of took some of that and built off of it. And I know that this semester too, they kind of did the same thing, built off of what we had as well. So it was a really neat experience getting to put on that event, getting to see people get a lot out of it, but really fulfilling for Fireside.
So what did you enjoy about the Nebraska trek when you went with the Engler program?
Yeah, so I went on 2 treks. I went on this one this past year, of course, that was out kind of from northeast to north central, really. I wouldn't call Valentine northwest. Some people in the east might say that's west, but that's probably about where the west starts, maybe. And that, of course, going through that area, we went right by, where I live now. Went through it. Through Long Pine, stopped in Ainsworth briefly. That trek was really good in the sense that there was a lot of focus too on sort of like community and building community, looking at what they had done in Ainsworth with their child development center, and then out in Valentine in general with what the mayor had done there, working with other people to really improve their community. So I really enjoyed that. And then 2 years ago, when we went out kind of south, southwest, and then out into the Panhandle. That was a really neat experience too, mainly because I just was not very familiar with that part of the state, and there was just a lot of unique things to see out there. I know we stopped and saw the Pacha Soap Company in Kearney. That was really cool. I remember the guy that was farming shrimp by McCook. I thought that was really neat. I think that's a new expanding area of agriculture. I think aquaculture has a lot of potential, so that was really cool to see. And then just out, we stopped at Imperial, of course, went to Aloe there. It's neat to see what that company is doing, in telecommunications for rural Nebraska. Of course, then we had that concert out in Imperial, too. That was a really fun experience. And then we went out to Scotts Bluff, too. So, really enjoyed the in-state treks. I would have loved to go on an out-of-state trek. I didn't quite pull the trigger on those soon enough to kind of participate in that. I'm not sure whether or not I really would have, but it still would have been a neat experience, but no harm done.
Engler really gives you those hands-on experiences by
Yes.
being able to go out in the summer and see these businesses that are actually working businesses and some of them Engler businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the Engler program, what have been some of your favorite classes that you've ever taken?
Ooh. Well, I guess for the core classes, I would say 101 is, everybody says they enjoy 101. I'm no different, really, though it's been a little while, so some of the details from that class might be a little more fuzzy for me, but I also really liked the 388 and 488. I liked just sort of the more, especially for 488, I liked the very practical approach we had of, like, this is how you build a business plan. Like this, if you want to get a loan from a bank to build a business, this is how you put the plan together to sell that. And it also made me and everybody else in that class think about our ideas more thoroughly and, try to figure out, could it actually work? And then Dave's just a great teacher. He's funny. And I think the way he gives feedback helped me at least to build a lot of confidence in my ideas too. So I really appreciated that.
Talking about different activities you've done here on campus.
Yes.
So NAYC, I know you've been involved in,
Yep.
and you're in Alpha Gamma Rho, right?
Yep.
Okay, so some of those activities, what has been most impactful for you being involved in those?
Obviously, I'm in Alpha Gamma Rho, and that sort of came about as I was, coming to college. I wasn't really considering Greek life, but my dad and my uncle and my now brother-in-law had been in Alpha Gamma Rho here. And then my other uncle had been in AGS, but he lost the debate there, I think. It actually was JC again, my older sister, who kind of pushed me to reach out to the rush chairs to get into that, and I'm glad I did because it's been a really rewarding experience. Any Greek organization, the number one benefit is the connections with the people, whether it's the tons of people that you'll go through it with while you're in college, but then also just all the alumni that you'll have the ability to make connections with as well. I was very active in the house, held multiple exec positions. I was our treasurer, then I was our new member education chair, and then I was also our vice president at the same time as that. But now I'm kind of in a bit of a semi-retirement, I guess, in AGR, but I'm also the only person in my class, I guess, to have lived in all 4 years, which has been a neat experience. And then with NAYC, the Nebraska Agricultural Youth Council, that has been a really awesome opportunity. Coming in, or at least my senior year, I chose not to apply for FFA office, state office. I just didn't. It is a much more different experience than, say, when my parents went through it. There's a lot that's expected of you, and it is a commitment, like a real commitment. I didn't want to do that, but I had attended both NAYIs that I was able to. Of course, the first one when I was a junior was during COVID, so that was online, which was definitely not as good as the in-person one. Then I got to attend NAYI after my senior year as a returning delegate, which was really rewarding. And then, of course, when I got here as a freshman, I applied and got on council and served for 3 years. And I mean, it is just NAYI as a delegate is an amazing experience that I would recommend to anyone who could go. But it is way more rewarding to be on council and to be in the behind the scenes of that and to, just work with others to put it together over the course of the year. And then to get to just see it all come together, to get to lead your group around during the week and watch, those kids grow. It is a very fulfilling experience. NAYC probably is the most impactful thing I have done so far, I would say. I guess outside of those two, I also was on the Kasner Student Advisory Board. So that was really kind of a neat experience. We got to work directly with the dean's office on a lot of things. Dean Hang Moss would attend a lot of our meetings in person too, which was neat to see. And my first year on the board too, I served as president, which was a challenging experience to say the least. Learned a lot about that because at that point I don't think I had ever been president of an organization before in actuality. It was a big learning curve, trying to understand my own leadership process, my own leadership mindset, I guess. And I learned about a lot of ways I can improve, I guess. So those were kind of my 3 main things that I did on campus, outside of Engler, of course.
So, I mean, through those leadership experiences, you've been able to teach about what the Engler program is or teach them about agriculture, or maybe they could be future students in the Engler program, right? So what would you say about your photo hanging on the wall? Because a lot of these students that you work with in NAYC, they could be future people on those walls. So what would you say about your photo on the photo wall?
Yeah, my photo to me sort of represents, I guess, my mindset in that it's okay to go through the program and to not come out the other side with an active business. I think, and they, you hear that you hear that from people in the program. Like when I was joining, I heard from people, whether it was my sister or others, it's all right. You don't have to end up with a business out of college. Engler to me more than anything is just like about the people, obviously, and then about better understanding who you are as a person. And then if, through, the entrepreneurial skills they teach you here, if you can turn that into a business, if you can come up with the idea that you actively want to pursue, then that's great. Some of us don't come up with that right away, and some of us come up with something that it's not really very feasible for us to do right out of college, and that's, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, my photo, in it I'm holding, it's an air filter box that's used to collect air samples for my undergrad research. We go out and we collect air samples downwind of hog farms that recently broke with porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, PRRS virus, to see if we can collect positive air samples from those farms. Of course, that disease has been very impactful to that industry, which, of course, from a beef background, I didn't really know much about the swine industry at all, really going into it. So that was kind of a neat thing, too, just to learn about, swine production, number one, but then also the impact that PRRS is having, which my knowledge of that is still a bit limited. So that's been a really neat experience that I've gotten to do through my work for Dr. Amy Schmidt in Schmidt Lab. It's Department of Biosystems Engineering. They do a lot of livestock and environmental research, and this is sort of one of their projects that they had been doing that I got to kind of join on for my undergrad research.
Yeah, so really combining both of those things, your major and the Engler program in your photo.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was essentially, and when I was planning the photo with the photographer, it basically became, since I don't have a business, it was, what represented me or what I was doing aside from that. So that's sort of where that came about. But yeah, I would say, if you take anything from the photo, it's that, there's a lot you can get out of this program without starting a business right after college.
And what are some of those lessons that you've learned that you would say are most impactful to you because even though you don't have a business, what would you say some of those lessons are?
I would say, one of the big lessons to me would probably be, if nothing else, just learn to be more comfortable with myself, I guess, being able to sort of come to terms with who I was and what was important to me, and that it's okay to do something that like nobody else in my immediate friend group or social network is doing. Anyone who kind of goes through that, that can be a little daunting, a little uncomfortable to be like the odd person out in a lot of ways. But, I think I've definitely through Engler and through other experiences, I've been able to kind of come to terms with that better and just kind of, accept, more of who I am and that, what I'm doing is impactful, at least I hope it can be. And so that's one lesson. From 101, a lot of just the core lessons in 101, are really impactful and like just other classes after that. Like some of the material that you read going through the core classes, I took a lot out of, whether it was Chop Wood, Carry Water, and other books. Just, if nothing else, just being willing to stay at the grind, stay at the grindstone, if that makes sense, keep working at it. Nothing happens overnight, I suppose. So it's just a valuable, no matter what you're doing in life, it's really important to stay at it, just to, keep your mind on the objective at hand, I'd say.
Yeah, and you can take that throughout your life, some of those skills. Yeah, and those lessons. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about what you do with your major. Do you do a lot of research with your major, or? Yeah,
so this is the research I kind of mentioned is basically the only research that I've done. I've been working in Schmidt Lab since October of 2022. So in that role, I basically, as a general lab tech, I would say I assisted some other undergraduate students with their projects, just performed a lot of lab tech duties, whether it was, preparing like samples for different projects or, just like cleaning, taking care of equipment, all sorts of stuff like that. So that was kind of like around that time when I was looking for, a lab to work in. I guess I should say, if you're in like biochem or something like that, a lot of people realize that, I probably should get some lab experience. So I had looked around and found that one, and it's a really good team that they got there. They do a lot of extension work too. Recently I've been putting together kind of like extension videos based off of articles that have already been posted through UNL through the manure team. So that's been a learning curve for me, because I'm not a very like videography person, putting like YouTube videos together on Canva and stuff, and everything else that I've been doing. So that's been kind of a strange thing for me to do, but I'm slowly learning. I guess that's kind of my main experience relating to my major. Of course, if you go through biochem, you're going to take a lot of labs, and I took plenty of labs. Some were really fun, some were not very fun at all. And I took all sorts of chemistry to get up to biochemistry. A lot of people on East Campus will complain about Chem 105, and I kind of just, I don't know. I mean, I had to start with 109, and then do 110, then I had to take OChem for a year, then I had to take biochem for a year. So it's just plenty of chemistry.
A lot of chemistry.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know you said that you like food science too. You're getting an interest in that.
Yes.
And you started kind of a business or a business idea.
Right. Yeah.
Earlier on.
Last semester, I believe, or maybe it was, I can't remember specifically when I declared the minor, but I declared the minor in fermentation science, which is one of the two minors offered through food science on Innovation Campus. So that's basically anything to do with fermented foods, which, anything from cheese to bread to alcoholic beverages to anything of that sort. But when I got to the 488, my business plan that I decided to work on for that class was for a microbrewery and an event space. Basically a neat way to combine my major and my minor. And then also the other angle I was looking at when I was developing that was the event space side of it for, sort of community development, I'd say, because in rural communities, a lot of times they don't always have good places for events, I guess. That's sometimes an issue that people have out there. That was a neat thing that I got to work on that's kind of in my back pocket for the future. We'll see when I do that, if I do that, but it certainly would be, if I was to do a business, it probably would be that, because my mom thought it was a little silly when I told her about this, but the process that goes into making fermented beverages, beer, wine, that process really interests me, and there's a lot of, even from a science standpoint, there's a lot of chemistry that goes into the fermentation, and so I find it really interesting, and I can see it as something that I could really dive into and really kind of create my own sort of deal with.
So maybe you'd see yourself too, if you ever started this, maybe you'd take it back to a smaller community. Yeah.
So when I was planning it, I actually thought about like what would it look like if I put it about right up at home.
Yeah.
About in that Ainsworth area. I thought that there's not a ton of stuff out there, but where we are at out there, we're located along Highway 20, which is I think it's the longest U.S. highway is Highway 20, runs through the north part of the state there. And then you also kind of have US 183 and 83, I think, that go north-south. You basically, with those highways running through, you actually get quite a bit of traffic, especially in the summer months when you have people that are going to the Niobrara River up there. We're pretty close to that. Our house where we live is actually just off of one of the creeks by Long Pine that goes into the Niobrara. So there's a bit of a tourist side to things that I thought I could tap into. And then also, the river up in South Dakota, the Missouri, is not very far away either. I thought it'd be a neat idea to explore what it would look like to put something there. There's also the possibility, I should say, that I could, if I were to develop like a product line of whether it's like craft beer or something, like I could find a way to get it into other retail outlets and things like that. And then the event space, whatever that would look like, would sort of supplement.
So, that sounds like a great opportunity, especially taking it back to your hometown with the tourism that's around there, too.
Yeah. Something that has a fair bit of potential. You look at on the Engler trek, this past one, we went out to Bolo Brewing in Valentine. I thought that was really neat. Those guys, they don't filter their water or anything. They use just straight Sandhills water, which I thought was really cool. It's sparsely populated out there, but there's probably room for one or two more breweries in there.
There's so many different unique businesses that come out of the Engler program and
Right.
that they take it back to smaller communities right here in Nebraska. Talking about the Engler program again, what do you think is so unique about this program?
Honestly, I think I would just go back to most of our backgrounds kind of in that rural, small community ag background. I think that's what sets us apart from the Center for Entrepreneurship on city campuses. It's sort of the unique communities that we come from that leads to the community we create here and the fellowship that comes with that. And then just like the unique perspective to all of that the staff bring through the classes that they teach and things like that, I'd say is what really sets us apart as a program. My favorite pillar might be partner, I would say. One thing I've learned, and I'm sure lots have learned too, is that we all have things that we're not great at. And that was something too that as you're thinking about building a business plan, your mind starts to arrive at all these places where you're like, you know what, I really don't think I'd be able to do this very well if I had to. So that's where you need somebody to run our branding and marketing and social media, because anyone who follows me on Instagram knows that I hardly post at all. So that's kind of what partner means to me, is working with people to help you where you're at your weakest so that we can all be better. And then I'd say just close second would probably be grit, just the work mindset and mentality that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the pillars too because it relates to a lot of college students coming to college and figuring out what they want to do, all these different opportunities coming their way, and all of those pillars can really connect. So one last question I want to ask you.
All right.
20 years from now, what will you be most thankful for being in the Engler program?
Definitely the connections. You never know going into the future who you're going to run into, who you're going to see again, when like an old friend is going to, be able to help you with something wherever you're going in your life. I think just the connections I've made here in the Engler program, as with other things in college, is going to be the most valuable for me going forward. And then that, along with just the knowledge I've gained relating to entrepreneurship and the mindset and just sort of the how-to, just if I wanted to start a business, that how to kind of go about those first steps is really important.
Entrepreneurship really is an experience and a journey, and it doesn't just happen overnight.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here today, Logan. I loved hearing more about your Engler journey, and I can't wait to see where you go with all of your opportunities.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.